Well, the day has finally come. We are at the finish line of one of Fans Strike Back's most infamous projects at this point, the Bantha. And it's been 2+ years since it was announced. I'm at the finish line as of this moment, but I'm painfully aware that most of the other customers who ordered this Bantha are not. And I wish that it was the other way around. I will go into how I was able to secure mine here in a minute. But Fans Strike Back's leadership has a lot to answer for. Regardless of what's under this shroud, they have a lot to answer for as far as mismanaging the rollout of these toys. All of their toys, the 13 figures, is still AWOL. Statements are now being made by the company that, well, they're not prioritizing those over other products because 95% of their customers buy other things as well from their business, which is a tune change from the months and months and months prior to this where they were saying, oh, the 13 is our top priority, it's our top priority. And now suddenly, not so much. The optics around this Bantha and the 13 are very bad right now because they're releasing other figures. And they just announced a Blue Snaggletooth re-release today. They've been shipping out Slave Leias. They've been shipping out Boba Fett's. They've been shipping out Fleet and Stormtrooper packs. All of those things that were announced after this Bantha and the 13. There is no rhyme or reason to how people are getting this Bantha. The only people that I've seen so far to actually acquire one are the sculptor himself, Kevin Sexton, the social media administrator for Fans Strike Back on Facebook, and a random YouTuber who isn't a toy guy, who did a glowing review of this thing, but has been seen in the weeks leading up to his acquisition of this Bantha, slamming Fans Strike Back over and over and over again for their delays and their constant deadline moving. So that's suspect. Like I've said before in videos prior to this, addressing some of this, we can't fall prey to rumors and lies, and we should never cast aspersions on people that are false. And I'm not going to do that here. I do think we deserve answers to a lot of questions that Fans Strike Back is not answering. So there's a lot of water under this bridge, and there's a lot of stuff that has to be discussed. And sadly, there's a lot of it that has to be discussed about this toy itself, but also about the company that sold this toy. Because this wasn't, chump change. This was $260. And they said in the description, which is still on their website, is that there will be no corners cut on this Bantha, and it will be exactly as Kenner would have produced it back when we were children. But then as the videos started to come out from the social media admin and the sculptor and that random YouTuber showing this thing, it was very clear that it wasn't anything close to what Kenner would have made. So let me just tell you how I fell into acquiring mine. Right around the time that Chris Smith's Stan Solo Bantha was being distributed, I was contacted by Kevin Sexton, the sculptor of this Bantha, the Fan Strike Back one. And he said that he had my Bantha and he'd like to bring it to me. Kevin lives in the same state that I do. And he wanted to drive it over. And I said, why do you have my Bantha and not Chris Krohn? Why am I not getting this directly from Chris Krohn as a paying customer? And he said, well, Chris thought that, you and I would be able to unbox this thing on camera, which is something that had been discussed way back when I did the interview 2 years ago. But as I told Chris Krohn directly and then also told Kevin, I said, guys, there is so much that's happened since then with the 13 figures and the Bantha. When I say so much that has happened, I don't mean the product's actually getting made. I mean more and more customers being angry, wondering where their, hundreds and hundreds of dollars have gone. And I'm one of them. So I told him, I said, there's no way that I'm going to do any kind of video that's going to inadvertently double as a promotional piece for you guys. I was like, I'm a paying customer. And I said, at this stage, because this has not been handled well, and because the other most expensive item in their inventory is also not shipped to customers after 2 years and has also been deprioritized in official communications by the leaders of the company, which to me is staggering. Like, it is staggering to know that the most expensive items on their punch list for people to buy are the ones they don't put any jet fuel behind. It's almost as if the more you spend with Fans Strike Back, the less urgency they give your purchase. And show me the lie there. Ask anybody who's purchased any of these things if they actually have them. So I told Kevin, I said, you're going to send that back to Chris Krohn, and he's going to send it to me the right way as a paying customer. I want to get it in a box with his address on it, with an invoice or a receipt inside and everything like that. Just like anybody else would get it. And I told Chris Krohn that as well. I had a very direct conversation with him. So that Bantha never showed up. It was several months, I guess. I don't remember when I did the Stan Solo Bantha review, but it was around that time. And so all that time until now, it didn't show up. And from what I understand, other people haven't been getting them because other videos haven't been coming out on the internet to my knowledge. So then it was time to go to Toylanta. Chris Krohn and Kevin Sexton were both supposed to be there to talk about this Bantha at a panel event that was going to happen after mine. In the last minute leading up to Toylanta, Chris Krohn backed out of going to the event. Kevin was there. We talked, and he said, I've got your Bantha here for you. And I told him, I said, I told Chris to ship it to me, and he was like, well, Chris thought that if we just held off and maybe we both met you here that, we could just hand it to you here to save on shipping. And then he made some statement about it, and also because of the way the post office acts, he was worried that it going back and forth, that it would get all bashed up or broken. I did the maths in that moment, and I thought, well, I don't like getting a product that I paid for like everybody else in some special way or random way or even unprofessional way, depending on how you want to look at it. But I thought, you know what? This might be the only chance to actually get one of these things in hand and see. I don't even care about the fact that, it was $260 to me as well. Yeah, that hurts a little bit, but it's more of it wasn't about the money for me and getting what I paid for. It was more about getting an honest look at this thing out to everybody who's paid for it. Because, like I said, everybody else who's done an assessment of this thing is either way too close to Fans Strike Back, or there's somebody who's flip-flopped on their public opinions. So I took the box was taped up. It had Kevin's address on it. And it was just a nondescript cardboard box. And I brought it home, and here it is. I don't see any reason to delay any further, so first of all, I'll just tell you that it's heavy. Real heavy. Heavy is usually the mark of quality. But unfortunately, I don't know if you can see that, but I'll show you in close-ups. These legs, they're not posable. And the reason they're not posable, see how they just spring right back? The reason that they're not posable is because These legs are attached to this thing via bungee cords that go through the body. So the front 2 legs are attached, the right 2 legs are attached with bungee cords, wrapped around hooks on either end of the leg, or on either leg. That, frankly, is not only very chintzy, but see how it's leaning forward now? Because it can't... There's no poseability in the legs because they're held there with these bungee cords. And the crazy thing to me is there was no Kenner Star Wars creature that was constructed that way. And remember, Fans Strike Back said, we're going to do this exactly the way Kenner would do it. That is not the way Kenner would have done it. Kenner did not put load-bearing weight on bungee-connected limbs. Yes, the Rancor's upper arms and the Wampa's upper arms were bungee corded together, but not their legs. The Dewback's legs were all solid jointed, pivot jointed into the body. The Tauntauns were pivot jointed into the body. All of the load-bearing limbs are solidly pivot jointed into the body. They do not use this He-Man leg band design because this is what you end up with. You have to literally sit there and try and, fiddle with them to get them to work, just to keep it standing. This thing is so heavy. And with the way all this looks, I started checking it out. And I noticed that the bottom of the feet were very glossy, very like colored glass reflective shiny. And that's when I started to wonder, is this thing even manufactured plastic? Because frankly, it looks and feels like poured resin. It looks like a resin kit. And I'm here to tell you that a resin kit is, one, not what Kenner would do. They certainly wouldn't have done that. And it shouldn't have cost $260. The details on the face and the toenails on the Bantha, they look like they could be hand painted on there. I'm not sure. This feels like it should be an $80 Etsy kit that you then get and then hand paint yourself and put together with a little printout of instructions. It doesn't look like professional Kenner work, and it certainly doesn't look like the quality of the Stan Solo Bantha, which is manufactured injection molded plastic parts that all go together and have a very nice finish. The saddle on this thing is flexible, and in the panel where Kevin discussed the project at Toylanta, he talked about going back and forth with the manufacturer, whoever that was. He said factory. I'm wondering if it's just some artisan that works out of their house that's doing these. I'm not trying to cast aspersions. I'm literally saying that it looks like a resin pour. It looks like a small run resin pour product. The saddle is flexible. You can flex it around in your hand and it won't break. But it does have some odd details such as saddlebags that hang over the horns and cannot be repositioned into their proper place because the horns are too close to the body for it to work out. There's no room. And that's not what the Bantha looked like in the film. It did not have saddlebags hanging over its horns. The tail is very odd because the tail looks like one large piece that was kind of shoved up into the body through another bit of sculpting. Maybe this is what the tail looks like in the movie with, a lot of fur coming off of it and then suddenly like a bare area. I don't know. I'd have to go back and look. It looks like a tree with a section that's missing bark is what it looks like. I just am not sure if that's what they intended with this project. On top of that, when you remove the saddle, that's when you start to notice some of the real homespun issues with this Bantha. For one, the saddle clasp is not like it is on the Stan Solo Bantha or the Kenner creatures, where it's a buckle system. No, this actually uses a leather upholstery fastening pin, a metal fastening pin for leather upholstery for furniture. And they've bent it at a right angle so it hooks into a hole, and then you have this brass pinhead sticking out of the side of the saddle. You can go online and buy these in packs of 30. When you take the saddle off the Bantha, there is an actual tan line, a saddle line in the fur on the Bantha. That never happened on a Kenner toy. When you took the saddle off the Tauntaun or the Dewback, there was no big indentation line where the saddle was exactly supposed to go. And then when you look down into the hole, when you take the infamous plug out of this thing, this plug comes out. First of all, the plug is so rough that you can see that it's like a resin. It's a resin mold. It's even got this really shiny end on it, which I'll show you in close-up as well. This hole is just big enough for a vintage sand person to fit through. But getting him out was nail-biting. I thought that I was going to rip the cape trying to get him out. I thought I was going to scuff up his feet, rub his toes off trying to get him out. I will never put a figure in this again. And then when you look down through the hole with a flashlight, you can see how smooth like glass the inside of the Bantha body is, where the sculpting wouldn't have been if they'd poured the mold, because the sculpting was all on the exterior. And you can see those bungee cords going right through the shoulder joints inside. This is not a Kenner-created style piece. This right here, if I can infer what Kevin said at his panel during his presentation, was that cost overruns became such to the point that they had deprioritized even thinking about how to do this, and Kevin didn't want to see his sculpt disappear into the ether. So if I was a betting man, I would say that Kevin had to pull some kind of Hail Mary play on his own to get this done, because it didn't sound like Chris Krohn and the Fans Strike Back were lifting a finger to make it happen. And I would also speculate, and I'm only speculating, this is not gospel, but based on the interview I had with him in this studio 2 years ago, I firmly suspect that this isn't what Kevin was expecting either. That Kevin was told that his sculpt was going to go to a competent factory and get deconstructed properly and then made into a mass-produced Kenner-style quality creature with a spring-loaded trapdoor and everything like that. And then you had to engineer the spring door.
They're doing that part. I didn't have to worry about it. Yeah, he told me I didn't have to worry about that. So I think they're taking the one off the Dewback.
I don't know if anybody at Fans Strike Back would be brave enough to back up the fact that they got in over their head on this and didn't know what to do. And then Kevin, no pun intended, took the reins just to save his pet project. But I'd put money on it. And he did the best that he could do. I don't even know if we can trust the word factory, because this looks and feels like a resin pour. I mean, I could get into all the nerd details. I could get into the fact that it's too big. I could get into the fact that, it's got this really high stomach. I could get into the fact that the eyes are crossed on the thing when you look at it straight ahead. But what's more important is the fact that regardless of how big it was supposed to be, regardless of what the sculpt looked like, there were some janky sculpts in the Kenner line, there's no doubt. To me, that's a non sequitur. The important element here is that they promised that this would be manufactured to Kenner quality specs. And it is not. It is not in any way, shape, or form a quality that Kenner would have given a thumbs up to. This is an Etsy kit. And I don't think it was intended to be that. I think they thought at the time, we're going to make a Kenner quality toy. And at the time, they were still partnered with Chris Smith. But then they burned that bridge with Chris Smith over what I can only speculate are faults on their end of mismanagement that clearly have trickled down into the situation we have now. I'm angry for everybody who purchased this. Not just me. This is what I do for a living. I assess this stuff, and then I make a video and it's either great or it's okay or it's garbage. And I'm going to say this in that vein. For $260, in the wake of how they described it and what they were promising, this is garbage. I feel bad for Kevin Sexton because I genuinely think that he was also sold a false bill of goods when he sculpted this. I think he was told, "Oh yeah, we're gonna do this up and get it to the right factory, and it's gonna be choice. It's gonna be great." That's how he described it to me in the interview we had.
I mean, I guess you had to make, this is what you made the molds off of, and then you sent
this is the original piece.
Okay, and then you sent the molded pieces from this to them so they could get the manufacturing.
Just in case, and the reason why us sculptors do that is you usually don't, it's not a practice to get the original piece because it's hot metal. It's like a mixture of tin, lead, and zinc.
Right.
You know, that could easily damage the piece. That way, if they was making the mold and something went south, and it didn't come out right, and the piece is ruined, hey Kevin, I need the left side of the Bantha. I'll just pour another left side, mail it to him.
Right.
He keeps on rocking.
But this is a sorry state of affairs. If this was an $80 kit on Etsy that was unpainted and you got it in the mail from an Etsy seller who was doing their resin pours, and you built it yourself and painted it yourself, then yeah, this would be a nice serviceable display piece for your Star Wars collection. But at $260, with all these promises of we're not going to cut any corners, that's their language. We're not going to cut any corners on this. This is going to be the same quality that Kenner delivered to you when you were a kid. Stan Solo's is almost half the price of this thing, if not more than less than half. Yeah, it's a little smaller because that actually looks more appropriate when you put them up next to the Kenner figures. It's got the trapdoor in it. The legs pivot on load-bearing joints. They're not bungee corded into the body. The saddle actually has the proper buckle instead of an upholstery stud. I couldn't believe that. It's a metal leather upholstery fastener, bent at a right angle, and it's just sitting out there, this antique faux brass fastener. Kenner would have never done that. All of this feels shade tree. I think the original sculpt and prototype had potential to go to a properly manufactured item. Would it have been as nice as the eventual Stan Solo one? I mean, probably not aesthetically, but it would have been better finish because it would have actually been plastic and not resin. It would have had a trap door in it. It would have had the proper limb attachments. So overall, it would have been a better piece. But as this sits right now, this is a disaster. And I don't think that the actual leadership at Fans Strike Back, and again, Kevin Sexton is a sculptor for hire. He is not part of the leadership of Fans Strike Back, but his reputation right now is attached to this company. So I'm sure he's trying to, I'm sure he's trying to do everything possible to just save certain situations and be a team player. But this right here is really bad for Fans Strike Back. Right now, I'm of an opinion that even if he only was able to give back $60, $70 because he didn't have the money from all these Banthas sold, he couldn't give them all back full refunds. Whatever amount of money he could give back to every customer that bought a Bantha, Chris Krohn should do so. This is that bad. And if it's what I speculated from what Kevin said at his panel, that Kevin was the one instrumental in getting something out there, and Chris was making no moves to actually make this thing, even though he had taken all the money, then he should be doubly ashamed. Chris Krohn should be embarrassed by this. And he should be embarrassed by the fact that he's making figure after figure around the 13 as well. Churning this out, which was one of his most expensive products. Fans Strike Back, you guys aren't going to survive this. especially if the 13 are terrible. Because I've already seen your sculpt of the Fleet Trooper compared with the Mark Poon Pro Custom Figure Fleet Trooper. I've already seen the sculpt of your Leia compared to the Stan Solo Leia, the Slave Leia. You're asking a lot money-wise, and you're giving very little. And I saw a post today where you said, oh, the only reason that the Slave Leia was coming out, it seems like it's ahead of the 13 and the Bantha, but in reality, it was done at the same time as the 13 and the Bantha. So, that's why we had it in our back pocket ready to go. There's only one problem with that, Chris Krohn. Kevin Sexton told the story about the Slave Leia at the panel at Toylanta on Saturday, and that's not what he said. And he said it all unprompted. He was just telling the story about how he became a sculptor for Fans Strike Back and all this stuff. That sculpt that he made of that Slave Leia went to Chris Smith because that was his arrangement and agreement with Chris Smith, because Chris Smith still owned Smith Lord Creations at the time. And he admitted at the panel that it was his panel, his presentation. He admitted, without any prompting, that he wasn't even aware that Smith Lord Creations had changed hands. So when you came around asking him to send you his Slave Leia sculpt, he said in public to everybody in that room, I told him I didn't have it because my agreement for that figure had been with Chris Smith. And then you said, well, could you do another one? And he said, sure, I can probably do another one. But the sculpt that went to Chris Smith was the one you claim was ready to go when the 13 and the Bantha were, in development phase. And then Kevin admitted that Chris Smith never mentioned what happened to that first sculpt because, this is Kevin's words, the Stan Solo Slave Leia is not his sculpt. Which I think, it's obvious from the sculpt that you guys are using at Fans Strike Back that it's not Kevin Sexton's work if you compare the two. So Kevin Sexton is telling a different story from what you're putting out there. And I suspect that's the case for a lot of things. So to Chris Krohn and the Fans Strike Back staff, you guys better get honest, and you better get honest fast. And you better stop BSing your customers. You ought to give as much of a refund to everybody as you can over this. And then you better put your entire focus into those 13 figures and make them the best things you can possibly make. Because I really haven't seen quality work from you guys maybe since the Thrawn. And that was probably the only thing you guys made at the time after Chris Smith's departure. And he was able to turn around and make quality figures throughout the pandemic and the lockdown, while you guys used it as an excuse to drag your feet and deliver nothing. I am not going to sit here and defend you guys against crappy products after you have overpromised and overpromised and overpromised and then deprioritized every customer who's paid you hundreds and hundreds of dollars for over 2 years. Yeah, sure, I will protect people who are being accused of buying real estate in Germany without evidence. Sure. But I'm not going to protect you from the evidence that's sitting right in front of me when you're a toy maker. This is a joke. And I ain't laughing.